remember this week, Joe Burrow said the playoffs are do or die. And if there's a game that epitomized do or die, we just saw it right here at Paycor Stadium. The Bengals win back-to-back postseason games in back-to-back seasons for the first time in franchise history. They set a team record, 9th straight win dating back to post-bye week, and that is just unbelievable. 24-17 the final. The Bengals are marching on to Buffalo. They're going to pick up where they left off from that Monday night game that was ultimately canceled, but nonetheless, the Bengals are back in the divisional round. And if you're going to start anywhere with this game, how can you not start with Sam Hubbard, his 98-yard fumble return touchdown, the longest go-ahead TD in the fourth quarter in NFL postseason history, the longest fumble return touchdown in NFL postseason history. And we're going to be writing a lot about this later tonight. But, I mean, when you saw that, like, just I want your perspective. You saw him return that ball. Did you actually think he might actually take that all the way in? Like, I was thinking, as long as he gets away from Mark Andrews, he's gone on that play.
Well, the first thing that crossed my mind was, okay, because we have a weird angle in the press box, so you can't really tell. So I'm like, okay, did he get in? Did Huntley get in the end zone? Because Huntley kind of meagerly threw his hands up, like saying, I was in. And you couldn't really tell. You needed to see the whole replay. So he's running down the field, and kind of in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, we might have a touchdown for the Ravens here anyway. Then you see the replay, and Huntley got nowhere near the end zone. He was almost a yard short. I mean, in a game like this, you need, not to say miraculous plays like that, but you need borderline heroic plays like that, because I don't think the Bengals necessarily played well enough to win tonight.
We get to that, but they didn't.
Yeah, like I thought, when we did our prediction, and you guys were kind of like looking at me like I had three heads when I was the Ravens were going to win, and like this game played out the way that the Ravens needed it to play out. The Bengals had 8 possessions in this game. 7 of them were meaningful because you take away the one possession where they had a kneel down to end the half. They scored a touchdown on their first drive of the half, and then they ran 12 plays right after that drive. Like
3 straight punts.
The Bengals did not play very well offensively. They kind of let the running backs for the Ravens do what they wanted. J.K. Dobbins was pissed after the game. When he was talking to reporters. I mean, this was a game that very much felt like it was going to go to Baltimore, and you just had that feeling like Cincinnati doesn't have it tonight. There was just that something missing, and Logan Wilson comes up with the play of the year, punches the ball out, and Sam Hubbard takes it back.
I think you're bearing a lead on their struggles, because I think that they were centered upon losing a third starting offensive lineman.
I don't know. They were struggling before that, though.
They were, yeah. They already gave up 2 sacks before Jackson Carman came in.
They weren't playing well, but they had scored 9 points, missed extra point. It was 9-7. Then kind of the fumble and the injury sort of deflated them. And in the second half is when they had the majority of the offensive struggles without Jonah Williams. 3 starters. You have Jackson Carman in, who's not even listed on the depth chart as your backup tackle. He comes in and plays that entire second half. I think that's what stopped them offensively. I never really felt like the Ravens were going to win this game. I mean, I know they were about to dive in and take the lead.
I don't know.
But they did not have the sort of, like I said, the offensive. Huntley shocked the stadium by throwing that 40-yard pass, but really that was the only thing. His only pass over 10 yards airtime the entire game. It never felt like they were in control. It felt like the Bengals were sort of waiting for the moment where they pounced, and it came in an unlikely time. But I thought that the Bengals, kind of were brought down to the Ravens level in this one, but still managed to escape. Like I said, I just never. I mean, the Ravens. With Huntley at quarterback, I mean, it was sloppy, really sloppy at times.
Not with his legs. I mean, he averaged 6 yards a carry. He ran for 54 yards, almost as much as J.K. Dobbins did.
Right, when those plays broke down because they didn't get what they wanted. He didn't get his first look.
So credit to the Bengals defense, but there were still big plays they gave up that they're going to look back at.
The Ravens' offense was a mess.
Not saying it was the cleanest, but
I think you could see
their passing game was a mess.
Right,
passing game was a mess. I agree.
And I mean, like, they were so limited into what they could do in the throwing game. I just didn't think that they were going to come through. I mean, I thought the Bengals were, even if they had fell behind, I thought they'd come back and take the lead, to be honest. I just didn't think that they the Ravens had it in them to win this game with the personnel that they had on the field.
I disagree. Like I thought, obviously I predicted the Ravens to win, but the Bengals go up 9-0, and then the Ravens really took over with that massive 17-play drive, and like I said, it just kind of felt like the more that the game went on, it was being played in the style that the Ravens wanted it to be played in. And
right, but they just weren't good enough to get over the hump. They were 1 of 4 in the red zone. They couldn't convert on third down, 3 of 11 versus the Bengals were 7 of 13. It was sort of, when you dive deep, I mean, they had more production, but when it came down to it, they just didn't have what it takes to sort of get over the hump. And I think that's because of the fact that they had their backup quarterback in. And by the way, J.K. Dobbins agrees with me. He says
if they had Lamar, they
win. They win.
Sure, I agree with him too.
I think it's an absolute missed opportunity for the Ravens that they didn't have him in the game. But I mean, give a credit to their defense. I thought they played really well. Played very fast. But I think they were aided in the fact that the Bengals were playing with a significant handicap up front and still managed to pull it out.
Yeah, I mean, the Ravens pretty much, you could tell they made it a key to get after Burrow, because even on the first couple of drives where they did have Jonah Williams, they were really getting in the face of Burrow. I think he only had like 2.1 seconds to throw per next-gen stats on his first couple of drives.
That's crazy to me.
They were really kind of sending the house after Burrow. They wanted to make him uncomfortable. And I think once Williams went down, he did get more uncomfortable. But again, like, you're looking at the scoreboard, and there's 12 minutes left. Ravens have first and goal at the 1, or first and goal at the 2, or whatever it was. I'm thinking right there, okay, the Ravens have Justin Tucker, so you're in range at what, the 45? Like, the Bengals were not playing well offensively, and the Ravens, I thought, had really kind of stepped up their game in the second half. Like, this game was teetering on the brink of kind of being a straight up disaster, because J.K. Dobbins was running the ball really effectively.
He was.
The Bengals shot themselves in the foot the first time they played with their short yardage play calling and red zone play calling. The script was slipped. I mean, that sequence, it was a Hall of Fame horrible sequence to how to manage a clock and how to
now, are you talking about
the 17-play drive?
No, the end of the game.
The end of the game.
Oh, sure.
But that happened
because they had 2 timeouts.
That happened multiple times when they had like 2nd and 1, 3rd and 1. They had no idea what to call. They did not go to Dobbins. They took him out of the field multiple times in those situations. Didn't even have him on the field.
I don't understand what.
And so
they handed the ball.
It's bizarre. I agree. That is bizarre.
They had no sort of faith in whatever their approach was. They had no faith in it, and it led to. And that all added up to why I felt like the Bengals have figured things out offensively. They had an identity. Even without their 3 stars on offensive line, this was Joe Burrow's team. They go as he goes. And they were going to find a way. The Ravens felt like they were going to stumble into a victory, or that was the only way it was going to happen. And they couldn't, because they just kept shooting themselves in the foot. They had the ball at the 45 was it 3 timeouts or 2 timeouts?
2 timeouts.
2 timeouts.
2 timeouts, and about 2:50 left, 2:45.
Yeah.
And they managed to get 10 yards in 2.5 minutes.
Yeah. Right. It was bad. That was bad.
So they could, and that was that was sort of symptomatic of, they got a couple, because like the long touchdown they had was a blown coverage by the Bengals. It wasn't something that, like Eli Apple made a bad play. It wasn't something necessarily that the Ravens did. So
well, he did have a bad play, but still,
I felt like that was kind of how they were going to win the way. Like the Bengals just fell over, which they did.
That's what Eli Apple did. He literally missed him.
But I just never felt the game was a doubt.
I super I think you could also make the argument that you met obviously the Ravens, that end of game clock management was terrible. I mean, what happens if they give the ball to J.K. Dobbins at the 1-yard line when it's
But that wasn't. They weren't doing that. They had a whole half.
I don't understand what they were.
It was clear that their whatever their short yardage package was completely broken.
Yep.
And it happened repeatedly in the game.
Right.
That's why some of those drives took long. Because they were bailed out. The one touchdown they wouldn't have even scored if it wasn't for Dax Hill and a face mask penalty. So they had a third. It was 3rd down. They had failed on 3rd down. They were not going to. I don't remember what the yardage was.
Because Dax Hill had a penalty on. Were you talking about the
kickoff return and in the end zone?
Or when he went, are you talking about
the face mask? He gave him an extra set of downs.
In the end zone.
But I also think that this kind of goes both ways too for the Bengals, because the Bengals were really sloppy as well. Like you had
they didn't score in their last 3 drives.
They got bailed out. You had the Ravens roughing the kicker penalty.
And it still didn't matter.
They had a punt. I think it was the fourth quarter where the ball goes out. There was a fumble and the ball goes out of bounds.
Trent Taylor fumbled the ball and it went out of bounds.
It would have been the Bengals would have had the ball.
So the Ravens
would have had the ball at the 30.
The Ravens had a 3rd and 5 at the 6-yard line. The pass is incomplete, Huntley sacked for a loss of 1. And so they would have had it at the 7 if Dax Hill wasn't called for that face mask penalty. They would have gone for the field goal. It would have been 9-3. It would have been a completely different game. That's why the game. I felt like their short yardage situations and their red zone situations, the offense, whatever. Huntley's limited availability in practice the last 2 weeks really seemed to impact them. The uncertainty that they probably had at quarterback. I don't know how true it was. Where they were, some reports had them they were going to split time. That didn't happen. But maybe that's kind of what contributed. But it felt like the offense was off, and they were scoring in spite of themselves almost. That, like I said, they got the face mask, they had the blown coverage, and that's why I just the Bengals were clearly the better team. They didn't play like
I did. I mean, they're the more talented team, but I don't know if they were the better team.
Look, I think two things can be true. It can be true, like Mike said, that the short yard packages were garbage. J.K. Dobbins would agree with me. I think Sam Hubbard would agree because there's a reason why he went as fast as he did. I think it's also true though that if you look at the Bengals' last 3 drives, you look at, no disrespect to Hayden Hurst, I know he made up for it with that was not a touchdown. They turned it over, but almost had a touchdown. Yeah, almost made up for it with the fumble that he had. But the point is, I also think the Bengals' offense looked kind of clunky. Look at the second half.
But that's only because of the fact that they were down 3 off.
Well, hang on. The second half they played last week, they didn't score on 7 of their last 8 drives. And this all in the second half. I'm looking at the chart right now. They didn't score on their last 3 drives.
Have to do with anything?
Because that's what made it so close. If they at least got a field goal or a touchdown on either of those last 3 drives, then you don't have to hold on to dear life for, hoping Huntley doesn't throw a Hail Mary in the end zone with time running out.
James almost caught, by the way.
Yeah. I don't think we realized that was almost a touchdown.
But they had the lead.
They had the lead, but I'm saying, if you scored, the Bengals score on either of those last 3 drives, then there's less pressure for your defense to stop Huntley from throwing a Hail Mary that, like Andrew said, almost got caught.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't understand what your point is.
Look, the Bengals had the ball 3 straight times in the fourth quarter, and they didn't score on either one. I'm saying if they got at least a field goal or a touchdown on either of their last 3 drives, they put that game away, and you're not holding your breath for dear life on the very last drive.
I don't think you were holding your breath. I think that when
they got down to the 17 and there was a holding penalty.
I'm saying even if they went down by a touchdown, I still felt like they would have won this game. That's how confident I was, and that the Bengals were the better team.
You're an overly confident
you were
person.
very confident.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
When you saw Tyler Huntley, I did not see a quarterback capable of outplaying.
No, but I saw a running game capable. But
they weren't. But they weren't consistent.
But if this game gets to overtime, though, Joe Burrow, the Bengals had not played well offensively in the second half, and whether or not you want to credit that to the offensive line, Jonah going down, whatever it was, the Bengals did not play well offensively really from the time that they took that 9-0 lead through the end of the game. And even if the Ravens score there and the Bengals tie it up, even if Hubbard scores that touchdown and then the Ravens tie it up, you're probably still dealing with a rock fight to finish this game. I'm not sure it was going to be clean either way.
But I don't think either quarterback that's good and one quarterback that's not.
Right, but I don't think either team.
So it's I feel it there's a clear delineation. One, he had the 2 turnovers, and those obviously loomed large.
Right.
And so I just feel like if you were gonna pick somebody in the fourth quarter to come out with the win, it would be no matter what the situation. If they were down, I think you would have taken the Bengals just because you have a clear game winner in Joe Burrow, and I just don't think you could.
Sure.
How could you have confidently said that Tyler Huntley was going to be able to close out the game? Because by the way, he didn't. He fumbled it away.
I think a good way to sum all this up though is to say that I don't think the Ravens executed their game plan to what they needed to, because I mentioned Friday and we kind of talked about this, that their path to victory was way smaller than the Bengals, just because they can't throw the ball like the Bengals can.
Penalties.
They committed
Absolutely.
the dumb penalties. Their clock management was terrible. They didn't give the ball to their best players. But I don't think the Bengals necessarily executed their game plan either, because I don't think their offense was very, very good.
But
both things can be true.
They can stumble and make it and be fine because they were the better team. They are the better team.
Okay, on paper they're the better team, but it just didn't materialize to that, is what Andrew's trying to say. That
I agree. One team left with the win.
One team left with a win, but it wasn't pretty. It's a win is a win, like Joe Burrow says, but it wasn't
pretty. It doesn't have to be pretty to be the better team.
Sure.
Like, they're the better team. Like, I don't understand what the point of disagreement.
Look, I want to ask you this because you were there. Obviously, Andrew and I went there.
I was there.
No, I'm saying, let me finish my sentence. You were at the New England game. You didn't think Mac Jones, down 22-0, was going to do what he did. You didn't think they were going to have a Hail Mary to Jacoby Myers or whoever caught that touchdown that was tipped. Like, you didn't think that was going to happen. The Patriots were not the better team on paper, but look what happened. Stuff just happened. But
if Ramondre Stevenson doesn't fumble,
then that's a different story. And don't forget, the Bengals still had to run the clock out, and the Patriots got the ball back again.
But again, you play like it
to win the game.
No,
yes, Herm Edwards, we know that.
I didn't say that, but thank you. But it worked, right? Like the better team won in New England. They stumbled and they made the play at the end against an inferior team, and what should have happened did happen. They left with the victory. So
you could say that,
I don't understand how that's a point. And they played ugly and they could still win. They could play a bad football game and still win because they're the better team.
So we can agree on that. They played like an ugly team, although on paper they're not an ugly team, and they still won. Just like the Buffalo Bills, who I don't know how they were that close against a third-string quarterback, which is another conversation for another podcast. But here's, I think, one thing we can all agree on is, yeah, that offensive line did not look good. It looked bad in the second half, and it's going to be a problem. This is not like something that's going to go away overnight, because if Jonah Williams is not good to go for whatever reason against the Bills, if his injury is more significant than we know it is, then you're riding with Jackson Carman, Hakeem Adeniji, and Max Sharping. Your only other two starters you have are Ted Karras and Cordell Volson, which, no disrespect to either of those guys,
that's
but
a disaster.
That's not much different than when you had Quentin Spain, not good, Trey Hopkins, not good, and then Hakeem Adeniji was at guard. I think he's going to be better at tackle, but he's still not La'el Collins, still not good. You're almost seeing some shades of what happened last year with that offensive line. 9 sacks against Tennessee, I think 4 against the Raiders. Funny enough, you get 4 sacks against the Ravens today, 7 in the Super Bowl. I'm not saying it's going to be that bad because you still have Karras and Volson, and I think Adeniji is better at tackle, although he still had some issues, gave up a sack or two. How concerned? I mean, we're concerned, but how much is this going to haunt them next week when you have Greg Rousseau, Shaq Lawson, Ed Oliver, and I want to say a pretty good pass rush that they're going to face in Buffalo next week?
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be good, because we saw the weather looks like, I mean, it's Buffalo, so famous last words, but the early weather report looks like it's not going to be terrible, which is good, because you're not going to be able to run the ball. They didn't run the ball well tonight. Joe Mixon, 11 carries, 39 yards, which is 3.5 yards a carry. Joe Burrow had a few scrambles. They didn't really rely on Pirine a lot. I think that if you're the Bills, you look at this game, and I'm curious to see what their game plan is going to be. And this is getting ahead of ourselves, but the offensive line showed you nothing tonight that would give you the confidence that you would need or you would want going into next week, because the Ravens blitzed, they couldn't really pick it up. The Ravens rushed with 4 or 5, and they couldn't really pick it up. I'm curious to see what you do. I think you've got to mix up pressures, because I think there were times tonight where it looked like Joe Burrow kind of double pumped. I want to go back and watch, but it kind of felt like Joe Burrow needed an extra beat. And when you do that, because you could feel pressure coming, that's when you beat the Bengals. So the Bills are a much better team than the Ravens
in the middle of the game, and so I think you can't necessarily project it, exactly what it'll look like. I mean, if Williams is out, they'll get a week of practice with the specific group. They'll obviously also carry some more linemen next week just in case. But I think it's a huge concern. Obviously, 3 starters down, but in terms of the game plan, I think you'd think they'd have more parts they're comfortable with calling. Right. Having spent a week repping them, because Zach talked about that after the game, that the hardest part is, Jackson Carman gets reps, but they're split between both tackle spots. So that specific group doesn't get very much together. So that's, I think, the challenge. This coaching staff's been good week to week, making the adjustments when you've got a player go down, being able to come up with a game plan that successfully avoids sort of the pitfalls or weaknesses that presents.
When you talk about groups, obviously, I know, like you made a good point, and I bring this up because this kind of ties to what I wanted to say. What really hurt the Bengals in that second half last week was that Burrow, and I think the offense as a whole, frankly, didn't have that killer instinct. I think it kind of came back, especially in the first half and going into the second half when they retook the lead, but which was more because of Sam Hubbard, but nonetheless, they still put up points coming out of halftime. How much more of a killer instinct do you think you saw from Joe Burrow, and how much better do you think the wide receivers and Hayden Hurst played together? Because, I mean, Chase had another good game, almost had 100 yards and a tutty. Hayden Hurst, like I said, he made up for that fumble he had. He almost had a touchdown. You didn't get that much out of Higgins and Boyd, but I think they each had a couple third down conversions. So, I mean, how much better do you think, the wide receiver unit looked as far as being polished compared to last week against the same defense?
I mean, last week, I don't think anybody put much stock into it. It was the Week 18 game where, they had already clinched the AFC North, and I don't think there was much carryover between week to week.
Right. Yeah. And again, I think Burrow was under siege for really the entire game. They started to get home in the second quarter, so it's kind of hard to kind of judge because I made a comment like I wonder if they're going to try a deep ball here at some point, and Mike kind of quipped like, who's going to block? Like, something to that.
Yeah, you didn't
effect.
have time to throw it downfield.
Like, you don't have time to throw a deep ball, so like it's kind of hard to get a read on that. Yeah.
And I think defensively, like we said, there's plays you want to take back, like Eli Apple missing on Demarcus Robinson, and I think the big thing aside from since Akeem Davis-Gaither made that interception, jumping in front of Mark Andrews, I mean, since that play, he pretty much owned them. Like, I know Huntley was not a good thrower. He was horrible, but when he threw, he actually did pretty well to Mark Andrews. We talked about this on the podcast this week. That was something they had to look out for, and I don't think they did the best job because Andrews was part of the reason why it almost came down to that last drive with the Hail Mary. I know Dawson Knox, without getting ahead of ourselves, isn't up to the level. Bill's tight end isn't up to the level of Mark Andrews, but I think when you look at the way he played and just the breakdowns and coverages, I mean, how concerned are you? Like, you got Stephon Diggs, you got Dawson Knox, you got Gabe Davis. I'm a little worried about that.
I did not think Tyler Huntley owned them. I mean, Andrews had 5 catches for 73 yards. He was
not bad.
Was targeted 10 times. They defended him pretty well. They had an interception when he was targeted. Germaine Pratt almost had a second interception when they went after him. I mean, I thought they did a pretty good job.
I will say
I
think
didn't see it like that.
I think if they play this game next week, the Bengals, they'll lose. I don't think that they need to be sharper.
That's what I'm trying to say.
You need to eliminate some of the mistakes that you made, mental and otherwise, because the Bills are a much better team. The offensive line, again, we talked about this coming into the game. Like, the offensive line, the right side of the offensive line was a major concern. Now it's the entire thing. Now it's the entire operation is a concern because you got both tackles out, your right guard is out. What does that mean for what Cordell and what Ted's responsibilities are going to be? That's going to be something that we dig into over the week. But,
absolutely.
The offensive line, the entire offensive line is now a concern. I think they got out of the game pretty healthy defensely.
They did. I mean, no injuries.
This was Eli Apple got banged up a little bit, but again, this was a game that whether or not you're on Mike's side where it's really he didn't think it was ever in doubt, or whether or not you thought it was very much in doubt, like, this was a losable game. And if you play this week next, or if you play this way next week in Buffalo, your season's going to end.
I think to kind of put a bow on us before we get to the game balls is, speaking of which, Sam Hubbard, I don't think some people may not understand, like, what he did was a big deal because he's a Cincinnati kid. He went to Muller High.
They might not understand his 98-yard fumble return.
He went to, listen,
was a big deal.
He's a Cincinnati kid. He went to Muller High School just up the interstate, I-75. He grew up here his whole life. Okay, I'm not trying to challenge people's intelligence here, Mike. What I'm trying to say is, I think we'll be looking back at this 20 years from now and saying, wow, like, that may have been one of the greatest plays in Bengals history. Not just greatest fumble return for a touchdown. Like, that may have been one of the greatest plays. And we're going to have more on this, obviously, but I know you guys haven't followed the Bengals extensively, but, like, that play that you saw, like, how does that compare to some other just big turning point moments you've seen in, like, big games like this from other players? I'm just trying to think. And,
it's a big game moment, but if they lose next week, I think it is overshadowed. It doesn't.
And what if they don't? But I'm saying, like, what if the Bengals either make it to the Super Bowl or they win it?
It's a little bit like Dave Roberts stealing second against the Yankees.
Yeah.
And then they lose. Like,
we still remember
Mike
it.
is right. Like, it's a cool moment, but it loses some lust if you some luster.
If it doesn't materialize into like something bigger, like an AFC.
But I mean, like
title or Super
I asked
Bowl.
some of the guys that like, have you ever? Some of them are like, yeah, I've played. Like I stupidly asked Ted Karras that question. He was like, well, yeah, Super Bowl 51. But like Joseph Osai was like, I have never seen anything like that ever in my
Super Bowl
in my
51.
life.
That was Falcons.
That was the
Patriots.
28-3.
Yeah.
So like there have been players that have seen that, but there are a lot of players in that locker room that were like, I have never seen a momentum swing like that ever in my football career. So that was nuts.
That's a season-saving play.
Yeah.
But as far as where it ranks, I mean, it all depends on what happens.
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
You can't. If
They win the Super Bowl. That play.
Right.
That play. Right.
Oh yeah.
They
I mean,
lose next week.
If they win the whole
lose
thing.
34-20 next week, I think people look at it a little differently than they do right now. But again,
Sure.
Zach Taylor is at the
As we're saying
Blind Pig with a game ball, and the crowd's going nuts. So
did
he's
say-
having a better time than we are because he's presumably drinking. So
He did say he was going to go to the bars after, and he was not lying. He was honest. He brought up the Santa Claus like he did last year when they won against the Raiders. But yeah, I mean, nothing like to just kind of put a bow on that. There's not enough you could say about Sam Hubbard. He's one of the core players who's been here before Zach Taylor even got here. He's one of the centerpieces of this team, not just the defense. How fitting is it for him to do that? Unbelievable. Game balls to wrap up a long, crazy night. Who's your game ball, Andrew?
Well, I mean, the obvious one's Hubbard, so I'll go a different one. Jesse Bates.
Sure, there you go.
He made a really, really nice play. Because I think when Huntley broke free there, it's pretty easy to look at and say, okay, well, he's going to score. Didn't really have to hustle, and just kind of you could have accepted it for what it was. But he knocks Huntley out at the 1 or the 2. Then again, this kind of gets back into the Ravens goal line situation because their next play was a pass to the fullback, which I didn't understand. But again, like what happened? What does this game look like? What happens if Jesse Bates doesn't haul ass and knock Tyler Huntley out of the 2-yard line? So Jesse Bates, like again, I think the Hubbard play is going to be the one that everybody remembers, rightfully so. But there were a lot of other side characters to that story that made a really, really big difference on how that game ended.
They're called supporting characters.
Supporting cast.
actors?
Supporting
Characters.
cast.
Supporting characters is fine. I'll just go Sam Hubbard because then I could be done.
There you
That's
go.
fair.
I'm going to say Logan Wilson.
And I didn't realize that was an important play until you pointed it out. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem. I'm glad I could help. I'm going to say, and speaking of supporting cast, Logan Wilson gets my game ball because, like Sam Hubbard said, that's one of the smartest players he knows. He's got a high football IQ and a high motor to go with that. He's also been on the other side of that. He's made game-winning plays like that, like he had against the Titans in the playoffs. I'd imagine we're going to see a lot more of Logan Wilson, especially with the game plan they'll have against Buffalo next week, which we'll get more into. But yeah, Logan Wilson, Sam Hubbard, Jesse Bates. Game balls, all on defense. Thank you all for tuning into this special playoff post-game edition of the Strictly Stripes podcast. Follow along with us later this week. We're going to talk everything about the Bills versus Bengals, divisional matchup, all the storylines and the emotion going into that game, and much, much more. But once again, for myself, Andrew Gillis, and Mike Nizick, I'm Muhammad Ahmad. Have a good night, and see you later this week.